What is up, everyone? This is RanserSSF4 and welcome to my first episode of my movie reviews. Now, before I mention the movie I want to talk about, I want to display a few rules about my movie reviews and how they work. I'll also put them in the description of this video so you can understand what it is. The first rule is that it has to be a recent movie. Actually, it has to be a recent film that just came out in theaters. Now, like for example, it could be World War Z that just came out yesterday, or maybe Man of Steel, or it could be anything. It has to be about a month old or less. If I review the movie after about 2 months or so, or at least more than a month, I'm not going to review it because if I haven't seen it. Rule number 2. It has to be a movie only that I'm interested in that. And even though if some of you request that I should review this other film or anything like that, keep in mind though, I don't go and see every movie. I only see movies that I'm interested in. So even if you do request a movie that you actually like and you want me to watch, if I'm not interested in it, then I won't watch it then. And so I am sorry if you would like to request me to watch these movies and give my reviews of them, but I wanted to point that out though. And the third rule is that, wait, is there a third rule? Hold on, I gotta think. Nah, those are pretty much the rules anyway. So the first movie, for my first episode, the first movie I want to talk about is a movie from an animation studio that is considered today as the kings of animation. Or one of the best studios in the movie industry. Known as Pixar Animation Studios. If you're not familiar with who the studio is, they brought you some classic masterpiece movies like Finding Nemo, Toy Story trilogy, Up, Ratatouille, The Incredibles. In fact, I'll actually show you here. Hold on a minute. I pretty much got all my favorite Pixar movies in this one freaking thing. Like, I'm not kidding you. But I got Toy Story, Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3, Up, Monsters Inc., and The Incredibles, Ratatouille, and actually my favorite one out of all of them, Finding Nemo is my favorite of all of them. So I pretty much own all of their best ones that are, in my opinion, were actually my favorite ones. The only one I'm missing is WALL-E, though. I need to find that DVD somewhere. So anyways, so yeah, Pixar Animation Studios. For the past 15 years, or actually no, past 25 years actually, they started off as like just a special effects studio. And then as they got a partnership deal with Disney, and got a little bit of extra boost of money profits from commercials and that, they made Toy Story, and then because it was groundbreaking, in that they decided to actually continue making movies. The problem was they had money issues back at the time, and mostly in the early 90s. And even after Toy Story's release, they still had money issues until they changed the deal with Disney after a stock thing. That Disney didn't extend the contract, and the deal was they split the money. They would get 50-50. And ever since then, they started releasing movie after movie that were masterpieces. And that's what made and what really made them also famous is because of the stories that they used to make these movies, actually. And that's real. And from all that hard work, they make masterpiece movie after masterpiece movie after another. However, in 2011, that's when a lot of things changed, actually, when they released a sequel to Cars 2. Which some people thought that maybe John Lasseter would have maybe learned his lesson from that film. And so, well, from the first Cars movie, maybe he would learn from his mistakes from that film. What actually happened instead, for most people said that all the same problems that were from the first movie are in this film too, with some more, in Cars 2. The Cars 2 has the same problems like the first one had, and had even more flaws to it. And because that it had a bad story, bad characters, despite good animation, critics absolutely hated the film. And it's not just the critics, the audience as well. They were so disappointed by this that they thought they could improve it to make it as good as the previous films. And then this begged people, hopefully the next film they release is not as bad as Cars 2. Like, basically a film that brings them back on top of their game. And the next one they released was Brave. Now, I will say this, I definitely liked Brave in that, but not as much as their previous films though, in my opinion. In that, and it did bring the back up a little bit, but not all the way to the top. Like, back up as the kings of animation. And ever since Brave only got decent reviews from critics, some people wondered, like, have they maybe lost their touch? Is their golden age has finally ended for good? Well, you're going to find out in this review when I talk about the recent film that just came out yesterday. On June 21st this year is Monsters University, the prequel to Monsters Inc. So you might be wondering, so wait, this is the first prequel, like aren't prequels really hard to make them good? Yes, that's true. Most prequels in the past ended up being pretty bad actually, because like if you look at the Star Wars movies, the first 3 that were released were good, but then the next 2 that come along, episodes 1, 2, 3, were all pretty bad actually. They were very predictable on that, and even though the visuals were good, the stories in those movies were predictable, and there really was not much character development in those films actually. So most prequels in that from the past, even to this day and even back in the past, like as far as like I said, when movies finally came into the scene on the big screen, prequels most of the time end up being pretty bad actually. They're never as good as the original. And there were a couple prequels in the past that are actually good from that, but I totally forgot what they were though. But there are a few I could try to think of, but I definitely know there were some in the past that were good. And so, how does this movie stand up actually? In that. So, how does Monsters University stand up as a prequel? Is it one of the best prequels of all times? Or is it just going to be one of the worst with the rest of the prequels from the past? So you're going to find out in this one, okay? So let's talk about the film. The story's about Mike Wazowski, or Mikey, or Mike, or either way you call him in that. He always goes by several different names from people who are fans of the first movie. In that, this film actually takes place about 10 years before the events of the first film. On that. But the beginning actually shows Mike on an elementary school field trip to the Monsters Incorporated company, where basically he encounters this monster and he wants to dream of becoming one. And after he snuck into the room actually, with the scare and got out safely, he wanted to become a scare. And so it fast forwards like a few seconds later, he now becomes a young adult actually, around 18 years old. And then he goes to the Monsters University for the first time, gets accepted, and then he tries to go into the room. And then he gets to his roommate. He now gets all the books he needs for his class. And and then as he goes into his new room, his roommate is actually Randall Boggs. Now there's a lot I have to say though about Randall Boggs actually, but we'll get to him later though. There's a lot I do have to say though about him. So then he goes to his classroom and that meets the teacher in the classes, and then he also meets the I would say she's either the principal of Monsters University, or maybe she's just the head of the scaring program, and that's actually what the program's called that they're in, is the scaring program. I'm going to tell you this though, she's freaking scary as hell. Now, I'm not saying that because of her design. She's basically like, the best way to describe her, she's pretty much a caterpillar with wings. Is that what actually makes her scary though, in my opinion, is that it's the way her tone is and the way she speaks and barely smiles or anything like that. It's like this. And one of the prime examples that makes her sound scary is actually the speech she says. Like, she says, "Scariness is the true measure of a monster. If you're not scary, what kind of a monster are you? Well, it is my job to make good scarers great scarers. Does not make mediocre students less mediocre. That is why at the end of the semester there will be a final exam. Fail that exam and you are out of the scaring program. So, I should hope you're all properly inspired." Then she gets her wings open and she flies off. Well, I can't really pronounce her voice because it's going to sound different on the camera, but if you saw the movie and saw the way she talked in that, you can understand what I'm talking about. But why I think she's scary by her voice. Alright. So then, as Mike is about to display the 5 types of ways to scare, James P. Sullivan comes in with a war, which to me is just shocking me, like, whoa. That's pretty shocking if you ask me. So then, and then after that, and then shortly after, he tries to pull this prank in that, well, Sully tries to pull a prank by stealing another university's mascot, which is some pig-looking monster, a pig. And then as he takes into war, make a war after the pig took Mike Wazowski's hat that he got from his field trip, he then, he gets to set the right war, make a war. And then the next, I'd say 10 or 15-ish or so minutes, is basically showing that they were enemies, what they did to compete against each other. And soon in that, they both get kicked out of the scaring crowd because of a little accident they did while trying to go, rawr, 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 rawr. You know, it's like trying to do a war against each other in that. And this pisses off the principal of Monster University, or the head of the scaring program, because she was actually, because it turns out she used to be a top scarer in the scaring industry in the film actually, because she broke a record in that. Then she got so mad about it because of what they did by the accident, and because of that they got kicked out of the scaring bracket. So now they have to join the scare games with the nerds of the film known as the Uzma Kappa team in order to actually get back in the scaring program, and then the rest of the film is mostly the scare games. Alright, so that's the story. I just want to check the video for a sec. I spent so much time talking about... Okay, I got 13 minutes left. So what did I actually like about the movie, actually? The first thing I want to mention is the story itself. I actually liked the story of the movie, if you could believe it. Now, I know some people might say, no, prequels are never as good as the original, because it's like you said. But the story is actually very hard to do, making it very hard to make them really good. To me, I felt the story of the movie was actually very interesting, actually. Now, I'm not going to lie. When I saw the trailers for that, they mentioned they were going to how the relationship built up, like between Mike and Sully. And I thought they were going to focus on the rival thing maybe too much through the whole movie. But then I count how many minutes it lasted, like scenes of how they were rivals for a bit. It only lasted at least 15 minutes, surprisingly, if you could believe it. It's only 15-ish or so minutes from what I remembered. And keep in mind, I saw this movie today with my grandma, actually. Yeah, so the thing is that the story, I gotta say, it has a lot of twists in it. Actually, some really unique twists I wasn't expecting, and some of the it definitely hard I'm really sorry that I couldn't speak right now. I'm so sorry. And the other thing that I liked about the story is that it is also very heartwarming. Actually, it's mostly heartwarming during the middle and the third act of the film. Actually, during the middle and the ending part of the film, the first bit is a bit heartwarming, but not really that much. It mostly focuses on the rivalry between Mike and Sully, and what actually happened after that. But after that, there's a lot of heartwarming moments in the second and the third part of the film. And it really kept me guessing on what was going to happen next, actually. In the movie actually kept making me guess what was actually going to happen next, actually. It's really pretty neat, actually. Now, keep in mind, in terms of a prequel, the story is really, really good, actually. In fact, there was an interview that Dan Skellen had with a reporter, and the reporter asked him, well, how hard was it to make the story even though it's a prequel? And then Dan Skellen said that he knew that prequels are very hard to make them good, to make the stories good despite predictable endings. So, we'll get to the ending part in a sec here. And I'm not going to spoil it, by the way. And so he probably worked his hardest to make the story good. And I gotta say though, as a prequel story, it's actually very good. It has lots of twists, it has a lot of heartwarming moments, and there are some parts in the film that make you keep guessing on what's gonna happen next. But as in terms of a movie by itself, it's a decent story. Not one of Pixar's best stories and that stuff. So anyways. The other thing I liked is the animation of the movie. Like, you already know Pixar, they make some of the best animation in the animation industry, including the films. It's always good, yada yada yada. Like, I agree. I definitely agree about that. Pixar always makes groundbreaking animation through their computer animated films. And this pretty much highly advances the fur thing. Like, if you don't know, Monsters Inc., one of the biggest challenges for the crew back in 2001 was trying to make fur on Sully look as realistic as possible, and they had to figure out a way to make it look good without the computer exploding, because back at the time they didn't have highly advanced computers. Nowadays, they have insanely powerful computers now that can handle that power even more now. So pretty much almost a lot of the monsters in the film actually have a lot of well-detailed fur on their skins. And even some of the monsters that don't have fur, their skins are actually well-detailed and textured well. Especially the design of the monsters is very creative actually. Unlike the original Monsters Inc., where there was only a few monsters you saw that you see throughout the entire film instead of the same few, where they are decently designed. In Monsters University, you have a ton more different new monsters, and they're all really uniquely designed. And I actually like that. I really like the animation of the movie, especially the texture and detail on the schools, the party houses, and much more. It's very, very interesting actually, and I really like that. And especially the design of the human characters is very similar to the design like from Toy Story 3 on Andy. It's very similar in design. Plus the hair is detailed well and stuff. It's actually pretty good. It's pretty unique and very well in my opinion. Thought I heard something. I just want to check the time here. Okay, so I got 8 more minutes, so let's go and continue. So yeah, I definitely like the animation. The animation is really well detailed, just like you would expect from Pixar. And quite honestly, I did forgot to mention this. I am a fan of Disney, but if I had to compare it to Pixar and Disney, which animation studio I like the most, which is pretty much my favorite animation studio, I actually like Pixar more than Disney because they make masterpiece movies every time. Alright, so now here's my other like of the movie, is the characters. I really like a lot of the characters in the movie actually. Like, first of all, I definitely like the way how they described Mike and Sully. Like, you probably already know if you saw the beginning, like, Mike is the serious one who wants to finish the work very hard. Right, actually. And Sully is actually the fun type who just doesn't want to study. And I find that these two monsters that are almost the opposite of each other is actually a good mix together, actually. Because as they set aside their differences later on in the year, they start to become friends, actually. They start to get to know each other better and start to become friends because then they have something in common. And that's usually like most relationships nowadays between either a couple, some friends, and that stuff. Even though maybe two people might be the opposite of each other, like if you get to know each other better or whatever, you actually start to get in a relationship between the two of you, and then you pretty much become either best friends or a couple. It all depends though. And I actually like that actually. I like how they did like most relationships were nowadays. I actually like that. And I definitely thought that the way they described these characters and developed them is actually pretty well developed. Well, actually between the two, Mike is the most well developed character actually, because we focus more on him and not that much on Sully. Which to me, I did find that to be kind of a small disappointment, but luckily they did even it out by focusing on Sully as well and showing off what he did. And pretty much what they showed off of how developed he is that Sully is actually the son of a legendary scarer who used to be one of the best in the scaring industry. And then the teacher thinks that Sully might come out on top in that just like his father did. And then they show a little respect sign right at the end. Now, I'm not going to spoil it, but he says something at the end that's very heartwarming in my opinion. It shows off what he's really truly all about. The other characters I actually like the Uzma Kappa team, because the Uzma Kappa team is actually pretty unique. You had an octopus guy who has the, things on his arm that sticks to on his arms like an octopus, or so whatever, and he's more like the mature one. There's also Terry with an I and Terry with a Y. They're pretty much two heads. They're pretty much like two heads who's in one body, just like most monsters. Or just like most monsters are. Or no, they pretty much are like twin brothers and they argue with each other a bit. And there's also Squishy. Now I know that sounds like a weird name, but there's Squishy. Squishy, he was not a bad character in my opinion. He was not bad of a character. Or no, he pretty much lives with the Uzma Kappa team in his mom's house. They isn't buries her mom. Now, she's barely in the movie though, in my opinion. She's not in the film that much. And we don't know much about her besides the fact she's the mom and she's all happy and excited and stuff like that. Like, there's not much about her, but I definitely liked her because she was so embarrassing then it was funny. It literally was, okay? And then there's the next Uzma Kappa team member, which I gotta say is actually possibly my favorite character of the whole film, is Art. Art is like, he looks like a rejected Muppet character if you look at his design. He's pretty much got tiny short arms like a T-Rex, and he's got really big hair with thick legs that he actually uses to walk around. Plus he's known, like, I refer to him as the wild one because he does some stupid crazy stuff that makes you laugh. Like, like there's these, like in one scene actually in the Scare Games, they have these tiny purple balls that are spiking poison that represent how toxic humans are. And so and then he gets so crazy he wants to touch one. He touches a million, he gets blow up into a giant ball. And trust me, it's really good. He's one of my favorites in the whole film. All right, I'm gonna be back in part 2. So, of my